So in the last lesson, we saw a review of various shells that have been created throughout the years, and we picked Bash as it is still the default on many Unix and Unix-like systems, and it'll probably be around for years into the future. So I'm going to open up the terminal app here on my Mac via Spotlight, and just increase the font a little bit. It's easier for you guys to read. And right away, we get this little warning. The default interactive shell is now ZSH, and you can switch to that with this command. So 99% of what we do in this course will be compatible with ZSH, or perhaps even all of it. So if you want to follow along with the default shell for Mac nowadays, you can go ahead and do that. But because this course is going to be specifically about Bash as a shell, I have already switched to using Bash as my shell. And so that can be accomplished if you're in Mac with this same command, but instead of the ZSH binary, you switch to the Bash binary. So that's bin bash. And you'll need to enter your password. And like I said, I've already switched to Bash, so no changes were made. So for now, we're going to go through a handful of very common Bash commands. In this lesson, there'll be ones mostly used for navigation and listing things. So remember from the last lesson, the definition of a shell is just a command and scripting language which provides access into the operating system itself. So anything we're able to do in the GUI, for example here on Mac in the Finder application where we can view files and folders, we should be able to do that in some form here in the shell. Another thing I want to mention is that Bash syntax is quite short and oftentimes fairly easy to remember. There are not too many long command names or keywords that you need to remember. But even when that's the case, we'll see how we can create some custom commands in future lessons to kind of get around that and remember commands for ourselves. So finally, the very first command we're going to learn here in Bash is pwd, which stands for print working directory. So I'll issue that now. And this command does exactly that. It prints the current directory that we're in. Since I'm on a Mac and in a freshly opened terminal, the default directory here is my user's root folder. So user/Chris, which is my username on this machine. If you're on a Linux-like system, you might find yourself in /root or perhaps / whatever your username is, depending on how you're logged in or the OS you're using. So we're in this default directory, but let's see how we can list the folders and files in this directory. That command is ls, which stands for list. All this command does is list the files and folders in a directory. So in my root here on my Mac, I've got the typical Mac folders to my desktop, documents, downloads, movies, music, and so on. Now, just like in Finder, let's say we want to move into one of these directories. And for right now, let's move into projects here, which is where I have the folder to the course repository where I'll keep all the commands and notes for each lesson. And so the command in Bash is cd, which stands for change directory. And we pass in the directory that we want to change to. So we can do that now. And now we can see in the prompt here that we are currently in the projects directory. If you don't have a prompt like this, we can use a command we've already learned, which is the present working directory to check. And we see now that we're in the projects folder. So I've already forgotten what I called this lesson repository. So let's use ls and check what we've got in here. And we can scroll through. I believe that I called it, yes, bash commands and scripting course. So we're going to cd into there too. And now the other nice feature with Bash is that it has tab complete. So if there's no other folders that start with the bash-c, which I don't have, if you press tab, it'll auto-complete for you and finish the command. And then you can just press enter. Now let's also check what I have in here. Nothing more right now than a shell script file, which we'll learn about in the coming lessons. So one thing you might notice is that this running log of command output is rather annoying and can get cluttered, and it's hard to read or see what you're doing. So the fourth command that we'll learn for this lesson is called clear. And of course, that simply clears whatever's output has been listed in the terminal. So I'll enter that now. And we see that we're brought up to a nice clean terminal again. And additionally, we haven't really lost that output. Clear just clears what you're currently seeing in the terminal app. So you can still go back and see previous commands. Clear just clears what you see in the visible part of the window. And now we had this lesson 3 shell file. And so another command we'll learn in this lesson is called open. And open will just use whatever your operating system's default is based on that file or that file extension. So actually, I'm not even sure what it is for Mac. I'm going to give it a shot here. And I'm using tab completion since that's the only file with that name here. And we see that the default turns out to be Xcode. Typically, I would open this in Visual Studio Code or a different code editor, but it seems that the default in Mac for shell scripts is Xcode. And so this file is empty, but for now, I want to write to illustrate the next and final command that we'll learn for this lesson. And so I'm just going to write some comments in this file and just save that and close it out. So let's list again. Nothing's changed here. We see our file. But without actually opening a GUI or program like we did with the open command, we can also view the contents of this shell file, or any file really, with the command cat. So that is cat lesson 3 sh, and it prints immediately the contents of this file, which is nothing more than this comments line. And so that's it for this initial command introduction lesson. We learned 6 bash commands: pwd, which is present working directory; ls, which stands for list; cd, which stands for change directory; open, which opens the file; clear, which clears the terminal; and cat, which lists the contents of the file that you pass to it. And so the commands in this lesson focused mostly on navigating and interacting with files, but in the next lesson, we'll get into doing some simple data modification and editing using Bash.